You finally did the inner work. You faced your past. You let go of the masks. You stopped pretending. So why do you feel worse? You thought healing would feel like peace. But now, you wake up empty. No drive, no hunger. Just silence. It's not depression. It's not laziness. It's something else. Something Carl Jung saw coming. No one talks about this part. The space between your old self dying and your new self not being born yet. In this video, we'll explore why healing makes you feel lost, why your old motivation is gone, and what's supposed to guide you now. If you're stuck in that quiet, confusing in-between, this is for you. You thought healing would bring peace, clarity, direction, a new version of yourself, grounded, focused, whole, but instead you feel nothing. Not pain, not joy, just numbness, blank. And the worst part is, you don't understand why. You did everything right. You journaled, you cried, you faced the hard stuff. So why does it feel like your motivation just vanished? Here's what no one tells you. Healing doesn't give you strength immediately. At first, it stops you. It strips away the reasons you used to move, the pressure, the performance, the fear. And when those things fall away, you don't feel free. You feel lost. You're not being pulled forward anymore, but you're not fully still either. You're floating, disconnected from the old engine that used to run your life. Before the healing, you were running on fear. Fear of being lazy, fear of not being good enough, fear of being forgotten. You called it ambition, but it wasn't. It was survival. You worked hard, but not out of love, out of fear for what would happen if you didn't. You weren't being driven by a dream, you were being chased by self-doubt. Then the shadow work began. You stopped running, you let go of the mask, you stopped chasing approval, and that's when the fire died too. Because fear was the fire. Now it's gone. And so is the urgency. It's like your life was a car running on dirty fuel. Guilt, shame, anxiety. Healing drained the tank, which is good. That fuel was destroying your system. But here's what no one prepared you for. Once the tank is empty, the car doesn't move. You sit there thinking, why can't I go anywhere? Nothing's wrong, you just haven't found a new fuel source yet. Carl Jung called this moment the collapse of the persona, the false identity we build to survive. It's the version of you that works overtime, smiles through burnout, keeps achieving just to stay safe. When that identity drops, everything gets quiet, uncomfortably quiet. No more drive, no goals, just stillness. And that stillness doesn't feel like peace, it feels like disconnection. But you're not depressed, you're decompressed. Your nervous system is finally coming down from years of panic, and that calm feels weird, because when chaos is all you've ever known, peace can feel like emptiness. And here's the hardest part. You're not just losing motivation, you're losing who you thought you were. The version of you that always had something to prove is gone. Now, there's no script, no pressure, but also no clarity. You don't want what you used to want, but you don't know what to want instead. Most people panic at this point. They rush to fill the void. They start new projects, chase new goals, build a different mask, anything to escape the stillness. But what if this isn't something to fix? What if this pause is exactly what's supposed to happen? You're not broken. You're not falling apart. You're falling inward. Jung called it the in-between, a space where the old self has died and the new self hasn't shown up yet. It's uncomfortable. It's confusing, but it's not the end. Think of a snake shedding its skin. It looks weak, slow, partially blind, but it's not sick. It's becoming something new. If your ambition is gone, it's not a failure. It's a sign that fear no longer owns you. You're just standing in the space it used to fill. And yes, it's quiet. Yes, it's unfamiliar. But that doesn't mean you're going backward. This is the blackout before the sunrise. Don't mistake it for the end. But now, a new fear starts creeping in. What if I'm not just empty? What if I'm slipping? At some point during healing, this quiet fear creeps in. I think I'm going backwards. You were doing the work. You felt clearer, lighter, like you were finally moving forward. Then, it all slowed down. You stopped feeling like yourself. Your goals lost their spark. The things that used to light you up now feel dull. You're not in pain. You're just disconnected, heavy, unmotivated, and deep down you wonder, did I lose something? But no, you didn't slip. You're not breaking. You're shifting. You're not falling apart. You're falling inward. We live in a world that sees stillness as failure. If you're not pushing, building, or striving, people assume you've given up. But real transformation doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like stopping. Sometimes it feels like falling. This phase, where nothing makes sense and everything feels unfamiliar, isn't regression, it's realignment. You're not returning to who you were, you're stepping away from it. And that process? It's slow, it's empty, it's awkward. Carl Jung called this space the threshold, a psychological in-between. You're no longer the old you, but the new version hasn't arrived yet. It's like walking out of one room and standing in a hallway, unsure which door to open next. And in that hallway, you start to feel lost, because the identity that knew how to perform, achieve, and succeed is gone. And here's the twist. That old version of you was good at surviving, good at pretending, ambitious, respected, functional, but also exhausted and disconnected. Now, that persona has fallen away, and you're left with a strange silence. What if that's not a problem? What if it's exactly where you're meant to be? Before the healing, your system ran on fear. Fear of failing, being judged, being invisible. That fear kept you moving, but it also kept you numb. Now that fear is gone, and without it, the movement stops. You slow down, and the stillness feels unsettling. But it's not wrong. It's just the first time your nervous system has been quiet enough to notice the silence. And calm doesn't always feel peaceful. Sometimes it feels like you've been unplugged, like you're floating with no direction. And that's scary, not because it's dangerous, but because it's unfamiliar. Most people can't sit with it, so they fill it with new goals, distractions, relationships, or hustle. Anything to avoid the awkward feeling of having no urgency. But here's the truth. If you don't sit in that silence, you'll end up rebuilding the same false identity in a new costume. You'll recreate the same pressure, just under a different name. This space, this in-between, is where most people run, but it's also where something true begins. You may notice your old passions feel distant. Your job no longer inspires you. Your habits, routines, even your relationships feel off. That doesn't mean you're broken. That's feedback. It means your life is trying to catch up to who you're becoming. Imagine floating underwater. For years, you've been swimming upstream, fighting, struggling, trying to stay afloat. Now, for the first time, you're not fighting, you're drifting. And even though it feels disorienting, you're actually safer than you've ever been. But most people won't understand. They'll say, you used to be so driven, and you won't have a simple answer. Because they're still running on the fuel you just stopped using. Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. You're not avoiding anymore. You're finally facing it. And that's why it's so quiet. So the real question now is, can you stay here long enough to hear what's underneath the silence? If you can, something small will begin to shift. Not a demand, not pressure, just a whisper, a quiet pull. And maybe that's where something new begins. After everything, you've stopped performing. You've stopped pretending. You've let go of the mask you wore for most of your life, and now, without the fear that used to push you, you're just here, still, quiet. And that silence brings a harder question. If fear no longer drives me, then what will? In the last part, we talked about how this middle space, this stillness, feels like floating. You're not drowning, but you're not moving either. You're just drifting, while the world keeps asking, so what's next? And maybe you don't know. Maybe the real question isn't what you're doing, but what's left when survival mode ends. When there's no fire under your feet, no monster chasing you, just you. It's a strange kind of freedom, and for a while, it doesn't feel good. It feels aimless. You spent years driven by pressure, fear of failure, fear of being forgotten, fear of being nothing. That fear disguised itself as ambition. It kept you going. And now that it's gone, there's no adrenaline, no urgency, just space. This is where people panic. They expect the next stage to feel like clarity, They think purpose will arrive loud and glowing like a spotlight. But real purpose rarely shows up that way. Most of the time, it starts small, quiet, almost invisible. You might start walking again, not because you're trying to stay in shape, just because it feels good to move. You might listen to music you haven't heard in years and feel something flicker. You might write a single sentence in a notebook, not to post online, not to turn into a brand, just to get something out of you. That's what real movement looks like after fear lets go. The world has taught us to chase meaning through performance. Find your passion, they say. Follow your purpose. But what if purpose doesn't look like a mission? What if it's a whisper? What if the next chapter of your life doesn't begin with a grand idea, but with a small moment of peace? I know someone who spent years in a high-stress job. Eventually it broke him. He quit without a plan. For months he did nothing, he just existed. Friends worried about him. He worried about himself. Then one day he found some scrap wood in his garage and started building a bench. No reason, just something to do with his hands. It didn't change his life. It didn't become a business. But that one day, building something simple, felt honest. So he did it again and again, not for success, just because it didn't hurt. For the first time in years, he was doing something without fear behind it. When you're not being pushed by fear, what guides you might feel slow, soft, even boring. But it's real, and that's what matters. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not the version of you shaped by fear, not the mask, the real you, beneath all the noise. But to become that person, you have to listen differently. Not for pressure, not for guilt, but for honesty. The kind of honesty that comes without urgency. The kind that just says, hey, maybe this." You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need a master plan. You just need to pay attention. Follow what feels true, even if it's small, even if it doesn't make sense. Because when you stop living from fear, you make space for something real to show up. And when it does, you'll know, not because it screams at you, but because it feels like you. If you're in that quiet in-between space, where nothing feels urgent but nothing feels clear, just type "still here" in the comments. You're not alone, and someone else might need to see that. And if even the things you used to love now feel empty, that's exactly what we're talking about next.